Thank you for joining us today for Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our Webinar Wednesday program, live from Washington, D.C. We are uncovering each part of the DFARS, or Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. As you know, the DFARS are the rule books for contracting with the Defense Department, and we are moving sequentially. We started with DFARS Part 201 in January, and we're finishing with Part 253 in December. Our webinars are every Wednesday and are provided complimentary. They're recorded and can be downloaded from our website and YouTube channel, which now holds over 450 of our government contracting webinars. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, so if you have questions for our speaker, we will have her information on the last slide of the presentation today. A special thanks to our educational sponsor, the National Veterans Small Business Coalition, for making these webinars possible. The NVSBC is the largest nonprofit trade association for veterans. Please visit their website for more information. Virginia PTAC at GMU offers free one-on-one counseling to firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. If you are interested in learning more, please use the link provided to explore what PTAC can offer. Set Aside Alert provides up-to-date news, information, and important opportunities for small business federal contractors. The daily opportunities alerts assure you won't miss important sources sought and solicitation announcements. Providing details, you can jump on the hot ones. Every 2 weeks, they deliver concise breaking news, events, regulations, and teaming opportunities. Okay, and now a little bit about us. We work with U.S. federal government contractors, including product, service, and software firms. Our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles and compliance, and more information can be found on our website. We also have opportunities for your organization to advertise in our newsletter. We now reach over 23,000 subscribers, and this includes both contractors and government. Contact us for pricing information with the email shown on your screen. I also wanted to inform you of a new series in 2021 this year. We have launched a monthly series called the GovCon Live Q&A Cafe. This is a live webinar series held each month, and these will take place on the second Friday of each month in 2021 at 12 p.m. Eastern. We've assembled a group of 4 panelists who are subject matter experts on a specific federal contracting topic. The panelists will make a short presentation about the topics listed here on your screen, and then they will take your live questions about that topic. So, for example, January started off with our panelists covering CMMC, and this month, on February 12th, another panelist will cover OTAs. Our panelists include attorneys, consultants, and other industry professionals. You can sign up on our website under the Q&A Cafe tab. Sponsorships are available, and you can email hello@jenniferschaus.com for a media kit with pricing details. Also note you can use code DFARS for a $15 discount. And now to introduce our speaker, Mary Beth Bosco. Welcome, Mary Beth. We are glad to have you here with us today, and I'll now turn the floor over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much. And thank you to all the attendees. I hope that you are healthy and dug out from the snowstorm. Just a little bit about me. I'm a government contracts attorney at Holland & Knight, and I basically do a little bit of everything in the government contracts field. Lots of regulatory counseling, including the FAR and the DFAR. So with that, let's have the first slide, please. There we go. So what I want to cover today, FAR Part 5 and DFARS Part 5, basically the provisions that govern how the government advertises, publicizes its sources sought and solicitations to attempt to draw the most competition possible. Just a step back a second, as you all most probably know, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, sets the basic standards, regulations, and clauses for government contractors, and then the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, or DFARS, fills in and augments, supplements the FAR. So I will be talking today about both the FAR and then the DFAR, where it is different or adds something. So what I want to talk about is really, first off, where can you go to learn about government opportunities? In addition to FedBizOpps, are there other places to look? Then we'll talk about what needs to be publicized and when, and dissemination of information. And that will cover the process of sending out sort of a pre-award notice, a pre-solicitation notice, and then a solicitation from the agency that's letting the contract. And we'll talk about what needs to be in both of those documents and what the timetables are for responding. Contract award notices must also be published by the government in FedBizOpps. And the last thing we'll talk about is release of procurement information by the government. In other words, you've submitted your proposal, who gets to see your proposal, and how is it safeguarded? Next slide, please. So these are some of the places you can go to find out what the government's up to, what live solicitations there are, and what pre-solicitation notices there are. So the first source is what's called Federal Business Opportunities, or FBO.gov. In FBO.gov, the government agencies are required to publish pre-solicitation notices, solicitations themselves, and then notices of award. And the FBO, if you haven't used it, is searchable by agency, by time period, by subject matter, even by location. So you can slice and dice that data. In addition to that, there's something called the Government Contract Directory, and it is a compilation of all the government-wide IDIQ contracts. So you can go and sort of look at what the proposal periods are, let's say, for one of the GWACs, and also what what task orders are coming up. As you can see from the slide, smaller procurements really are not published. The government doesn't publish those anywhere in FBO. They may just put it in their own databases. The Navy, for example, has its own database of upcoming solicitations. It covers both small ones and large ones. So if you're interested in Navy contracting, you should, keep your eye on that. And then for those of you who are more interested in trends and looking further down the line, you can find out, a lot about what an agency is planning if you look at the budget that comes out every year. Or if you can get a hand on it, you should be able to, the agency's budget request. And then some agencies like DOD have 5-year planning documents that are public information. So you can take a look at those and see where spending might be increasing or decreasing. And that may guide sort of the direction you might want to take, or maybe the employees that you're hiring. Next, please. So as I said, the government, DOD, must publish a post-solicitation notice. And you'll see that string of citations to both the FAR and the DFARS. Those are the sites Those are the provisions that talk about pre-solicitation notices. So before issuing a solicitation, DoD must publish a pre-solicitation notice or synopsis. So except for commercial item procurements, the synopsis must be published within 15 days or before 15 days of the issuance of the solicitation. They must also publish notice of intent to make a sole source award. So if a DoD wants to make a sole source award to a particular company, they have to publish their intent to give people a chance to sort of pop up and say, hey, wait a minute, we can perform that as well. Why is this sole source? You should compete it. And then for small businesses, DoD is required to provide 30 days notice of bundled procurements. And what that means is if DoD takes several different requirements or several different contracts and puts them together into one, that may dissuade or make it impossible for small businesses to bid on. If, in contrast, they had separate procurements for, maybe small businesses would be eligible to bid on one, let's say, out of three. So that's why they publish that, again, to give small businesses a chance to say, hey, wait a minute, you shouldn't be doing that. The synopsis of these contract opportunities, they're generally pretty follow a format. There is a synopsis of the work that's going to be performed. There's, contact information. And then one thing to particularly pay attention to is these are supposed to contain any special qualifications for bidding. So they should say, for example, this is a Buy America Act covered procurement, or this procurement will require a facility clearance at time of award. So that serves two purposes. One, gives you time, a little bit more time to get your ducks in a row. And two, it gives the agency, if you contact the agency at that point and say, hey, wait a minute, you can't require, whatever it is, because that will, that will diminish competition. I think probably one of the best examples of that is sometimes you'll see a procurement that requires a contractor to have either been audited by DCAA or have advanced purchasing system approval. And of course, not every contractor has been audited by DCAA. So if you see something like that, you should probably jump on the phone or send an email and ask about it. Next slide, please. So this really talks about, what the time sequence is. So your synopsis has to be published 15 days before the RFP. Then the RFP is supposed to allow 30 days response for bids or proposals. In almost all cases, DoD follows that. Sometimes I've seen them try and shave a little bit of time off, but usually protesters, contractors contact the agency and say, wait a minute, you're going to miss out on some proposals. For DoD, if it has a turnaround time that's less than 30 days and it's only one proposal, only one offeror responds, then DoD has to resolicit and provide a full 30-day response time. Agencies who are letting out R&D contracts over the simplified acquisition threshold, which is $250,000, they have to allow 45 days response time. One thing that is really important is that your response date is critical for pre-award protests. In other words, if you are considering bidding on a solicitation, and let's say it contains that audit requirement, you have to protest that before the closing date for proposals. If you don't, you can never bring that up again. So one of the first things that, people should look at when they get a solicitation are things exactly like that. Are there unduly restrictive provisions? And that's the standard you have to show for a pre-award protest. This restriction, whatever it is unduly burdensome and will have a diminished competition. Other things is sometimes you'll see inconsistencies within a solicitation. One section might say one thing and another one might say another thing. Usually agencies give you some period of time to submit questions and answers. And in a lot of cases, if you point that out to the agency, they will make a correction. If they don't make a correction and there's still a contradiction or ambiguity, then again, if you want to raise that as a formal issue, you have to file a protest. I think when you're talking about pre-award protests, particularly when it's about something relatively minor in the solicitation, they just won't come to the table and resolve the conflict. Agency protests are usually the way to go because they're less confrontational than a GAO protest, and I think it gives the agency more of an off-ramp to make a change to the solicitation. Prime contractors can also sometimes transmit their subcontracting opportunities to FedBiz Ops and get them published so that they will increase their pool of potential subcontractors. Next slide. So now we're at the solicitation. What does it have to contain? It's clearly going to be more fulsome than the synopsis. So it will contain what's almost always Section C, which is a description of the government's requirements, the statement of work. It also must contain the anticipated terms and conditions that will apply to the contract. And that really means two different things. One is the contract clauses that will appear in the final contract. So you have a chance to look through those to ensure that you can comply with whatever is required, or get started to put in a compliance program. And also the terms and conditions will state what's called sort of mandatory requirements, almost go, no go requirements. If you can't meet this set of requirements, whatever they may be, you cannot submit a proposal. They're not in every, they're not in every solicitation, but you need to really look out for those, because if you don't meet, say, 1 of 10 of the mandatory requirements, you are not eligible to be awarded the contract. There's also Section L in solicitations, and Section L is what's required to be in your proposal. It'll tell you how many sections the government wants. It has page limits. If it's going to require some kind of attachments or drawings, etc., they're in Section L. And then Section M, which is one of the most important pieces of proposals, solicitations, is the section that lays out what the government's evaluation factors are going to be. So it will say whether the government is going to make this a best value award. In other words, a trade-off between technical and price, and it will also tell you which factors are weighted more heavily. Is price more important? Is management more important, etc.? And it will then, have sub-factors within each of the general factors. So typically you'll see these days a solicitation that will have sections on technical capability, management capability, past performance, sometimes small business subcontracting plans, sometimes cybersecurity. And within each of those general requirements, you will see sub-factors. And then, again, it's important to note that the RFP itself will tell you, usually in descending order of importance, what the government is going to weight most heavily when it goes to evaluate the proposals. Next slide, please. I think this is an interesting section, the release of information, because as you can imagine, competitors like to competitors would love to get other companies' solicitations. So although the general DFAR and FAR rules say that the agencies are charged with protecting your proprietary data, and there's a list of information that they should not release to the public, such as information that's received in confidence, maybe some personnel information, documents pertaining to internal agency communications, and documents requiring protection under the Freedom of Information Act or Privacy Act. And there is something we call reverse FOIA requests. And what that means is, let's say a competitor submits a Freedom of Information Act request for your proposal to, let's say, a contract that was awarded 4 months ago, right? And a copy of the contract. Well, the contract should be a public document in some cases, but you can object to release of what you consider to be proprietary information. Your proposal should really be kept in confidence. You don't see those released very often unless they are made a part of the contract, because the contract is really the public document. So the process for this is that the contracting agency receives a FOIA request, and then they send it to you, the person whose information is being sought, and give you 10 days to advise the agency why or why not you object to release, and you have to specifically say what you object to. You can't say, we object to the release of the entire contract. The general rules are that things like unit prices, where everything is baked in, are releasable to the public. But things like overhead, G&A rates, other fringe benefit information that you use to build up to your offer are not available or should not be released, because obviously your competitor can probably reverse engineer from there. Also, contractors often object to release of at least parts of their technical proposals, because they don't want their competitors seeing even things like how the workforce for the particular contract is being organized. So you submit your objection letter, you submit with it a copy of the contract with the areas you want to protect blacked out, and then the agency makes its decision as to whether or not it's going to release the entire document over your objections. If it does make that determination, it will notify you so that you, if you want to, can pursue in court an injunction to try and stop the release. when you submit your proposals too, it's important to remember that you put on every page that this is a confidential and proprietary information is in the solicitation and it's protected from release. That's one thing that's important when you're making the argument that your data should not be released, because, you know, one of the things you'll have to show is that you regularly protect the data that you don't want released. If you don't put confidential on your proposal, and of course the person who submitted the FOIA will say, well, they can't meet the test of trying to protect this information because they didn't mark it in their proposal, and I have seen that argument win in some cases. So that's important. Now, contracting officers can give members of Congress information that is supposed to be kept in confidence. You know, leaks from Congress occur occasionally, but usually the agencies comply with congressional requests. In terms of when contractors might go to Congress for issues, you know, if it's a big solicitation and it hasn't been issued yet, but you know it's coming up, sometimes it's not a bad idea to go meet your congressman, not to really specifically discuss the solicitation, but talk about your capabilities and, you know, the amount of people you employ in their district, and then just give them a heads up that this solicitation is coming down the road. Once a solicitation is issued, unless there's something really devastating about it, like it's going to release, you know, your most sacred trade secret, Congress will not intervene once a solicitation is issued, because at that point it's up to the agencies. But, you know, just to repeat, if there's a big solicitation coming up, you might want to think about, you know, just having a friendly meet and greet with your congressman, not ask for anything at that meeting, but at least sort of prime the pump in case you do need some help later on. Next slide. This last slide talks about researching what your competitors are doing. I think it's very helpful sometimes just to see what your competitors are selling to the government, what types of contracts they've gotten, the amounts of contracts, and there are a number of databases available to that. FedBizOps, for example, publishes award information. USA Spending and the Federal Procurement Database Systems list all contract awards, and they are very searchable, and you can really slice and dice the information. You can, you know, look at what agencies your competitors might be, you know, contracting with. You can see the number of contracts they've received. You can see the dollar amounts. You can see where they are, you know, where they seem to be putting emphasis. And also, sometimes, and I think this is true with the GSA schedule, if you're thinking about getting into a new line of business, it's not bad to take a look at what your competitors are doing. And if they're not receiving awards, it may just be that the agencies aren't buying that stuff. So it's a way to, in a way to, you know, assist in planning. And then, interestingly, the Department of Defense publishes its contract awards over $7.5 million on a daily basis, which is also, and there's a synopsis of the award, who it went to, what the work is for. So that's also a good source. The civilian agencies are also supposed to do that, but I don't see them complying as much as DoD does. And with that, I'll just say thank you for tuning in and turn it back over.
Thank you, Mary Beth, for a great presentation and sharing your time with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this webinar. The recording will be on our website and YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. And we will be covering more of the DFARS parts next week on Wednesday.